إله العالمين لك الفداء يا غريب ويا مظلوم كربلاء. ثم السلام عليكم يا أهل العزاء الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته مع الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أما بعد فقد قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم إني تارك فيكم الثقلين كتاب الله وإترتي أهل البيت ما فيكم ما إن تمسكتم به لن تذلوا بعدي أحدهما أعظم من الآخر كتاب الله حبل ممدود من السماء إلى الأرض وإترتي أهل البيت ولن يتفرقا حتى يردا عليه على الحوض. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Brothers and sisters in Iman, our discussion on the role of the Quran and the progeny of the Prophet as our guidance continues tonight. We saw in the last 3 lectures briefly the relationship between the Prophet as a guide and the Quran as a second guide. And we saw also that the Quran, which is the guide from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is not the Quran unless it comes out from the mouth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because when the Quran was revealed, it was revealed to the Prophet, and the Prophet then read it out. Therefore, every single word of the Quran comes out from the mouth of the Prophet. That is the relationship between the Prophet and the Quran. That is the relationship. So close that any word that did not come out from the mouth of the Quran is not the Quran. However, from this very mouth of the Prophet, from which came out the Quran, also came out the Hadith. So what is the difference between the Quran and the tradition, the Hadith of the Prophet? The Quran is every single word is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every single word. Hadith is the words of the Prophet interpreting, explaining what is in the Quran. This is the difference. That is what we are going, inshallah, to see tonight. Explanation, how we will see the relationship between the Prophet and the Quran, as we have seen up to today. Today we'll take one step ahead and see who explains to us this relationship. If you read one salawat, then inshallah we'll continue. Therefore, there is this very famous hadith which I have read in front of you, and this is reproduced from Sahih at-Tirmizi. This hadith is not something which is new and found only with the Shias. It is also coming from our brothers Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. What does it say? It says that the Prophet said, this is his hadith now. This hadith, this is not Quran, this is hadith. What does it say? I leave 2 great, precious things among you. 2 things I'm leaving among you. What is it? The book of Allah and my home, my household. Itra. If you keep both of them, you will never, if you hold on to both of them, you will never go astray after me. One of them is greater than the other. The book of Allah is like a rope hanging from heaven to earth. And the other is my household, Ahlul Bayt, Itra. Remember, these two will never be separated from each other until they encounter me at Kawthar. This is the hadith coming from the Prophet. This is explained now. As we said, the Prophet, as far as he was there, he is the primary source of the wahi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and every word that he said became the Quran. And he distinguished, that's his honesty. He told us, this is the Quran, this is my hadith. He distinguished it. And therefore, so far as he was there, the guide is there, we all know about it. But what happens now that the guide leaves this world? Does it mean then we are all left in the middle of the road and there is no guide? It is in light of that now, as we say, we'll now look at the sample studies. What is a sample study? We'll look at it today. This is a dua which was taught to us by our fourth Imam, Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salatu wasalam. This is dua number, supplication number 42. What is it about? This is the dua that the Imam used to read. Once he had finished reading the Quran, he would read this dua. What is the significance of this dua? What happened, as we explained last time, this is the Imam of the time. This is the guide now. When is he? He is in a situation when Islam is at the verge of being destroyed. Why? The Prophet is gone. Ali ibn Abi Talib is gone. Fatima Az-Zahra is gone. Hassan is gone. Imam Hussein has been martyred in such a way, as we explained yesterday, that his head was put on the edge of a spear. And Khana Kaaba was set on fire. The house of the Prophet, the mosque of the Prophet, was invaded and violated. This is the situation in which this Imam is there. How does he save Islam? The best way for him to save Islam, how he's going to guide the Ummah. This is the way he used it. These du'as which are private, normally these du'as are private. These are the du'as, this is through the du'as that the Imam guides the Ummah. How does he guide the Ummah? These du'as are not just to be recited. If he addresses Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is going to stop him? He goes to the mosque, he is with the public, he recites these du'as. Who is going to stop him? And yet, these are the du'as. If you look at these du'as actually are the ways of life. This is what is du'a is. Now this du'a, for example, that number 42, this is how he first of all introduces the Prophet. Why? Because the situation has become such, people have forgotten who the Prophet is. Now he has to revive Islam. It's on the verge of becoming extinct. What does he do? This is what he says. He talks about the Quran, first of all, the status of Quran. He says, Anzaltahu Nura. That Quran is a light. وَجَعَلْتَهُ مُحَيْمِنًا عَلَى كُلِّ كِتَابٍ أَنزَلْتَهُ. And this Quran is a guardian of every other book that has been sent down. This is the time when these Umayyad are giving very much importance to other religions to replace Islam. Therefore, there are hadiths, there are traditions which are concocted and brought out from what is in the Bible. For example, that the prophets committed all kinds of sins. The prophets who are in the Bible have committed a lot of sins. If you read about Nabi Nuh, of what the sins that he committed, ma'adallah, of Nabi Sulaiman, These are the traditions that are now Umayyad bringing into Islam. And what the Imam is telling the public is those books have been replaced. There is nothing in that book. You want to get guidance, it is in the Quran, because the Quran replaces all those books which were there. You want to save your religion, stick with Quran. Do not listen to those corrupt stories. When the prophets are there, they are all ma'asumin. This is what the Imam in his own way is telling the Ummah. Then, having done that, then he mentions the status of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt. وَوَحْيًا أَنزَلْتَهُ عَلَى نَبِيِّكَ مُحَمَّدٍ صَلَوَاتُكَ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ تَنْزِيلًا. This Quran, Imam is saying, is a revelation. The words of Quran are the words that came from the mouth of Muhammad, but they are directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this was sent down upon Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. What does it mean? It means the Quran that came to the Prophet. And what the Prophet will tell you about the Quran is what is in the Quran, not what these Umayyads will tell you about what is in the Quran. Why? Because the Umayyads were presenting themselves as what? Shadow of God, shadow of Allah. The Umayyad were telling the Ummah that they were shadow of Allah. What Imam is telling them is that there is no shadow of Allah. This is the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. You want to save your religion, stick with this. Do not let these people indoctrinate you with foreign ideas. You want to seek Islam, you will seek through Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Now comes the next step, which is very, very interesting, and that is he discusses the Quran, the challenge that Quran will face. وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا لِلنَّاسِ فِي هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ مِنْ مَثَلٍ. What does it mean? The Quran says that indeed we have for people in this Quran every kind of example. Everything that is there is in the Quran. If this is so, then immediately the Umayyad would ask. And they would say, oh, everything is in the Quran. Where is it said that we should pray Subuh 2 rakats, Maghrib 3 rakat? Oh, where is it in the Quran? If everything is in the Quran, so where is this? In other words, immediately assassination of the validity of the Quran and the validity of the status of the Prophet. Therefore, Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salatu wasalam addresses this challenge. What does he say? That this Quran, Imam says in this dua, that this Quran which have come from Allah is mujmalan. What does mujmalan means? Means it is in a summary form. Why? Because Islam is a way of life. If Islam was going to say everything in details, this Quran would be in volumes. Not only would be it in volumes, but because this Quran is for all the ages to come, a few things which are said for a particular point time, relevant for a particular time, would become irrelevant. Therefore, Quran itself, a lot of parts of it would become irrelevant. Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals the Quran in such a way that it will remain relevant for all the ages to come. But for that to happen, he will have to make it mujmal. But if it is mujmal, then how? Then Imam alayhi salatu wasalam says, and then وَأَلْحَمْتَهُ إِلْمَ عَجَائِبِ مُقَمَّلًا. That Quran itself is mujmal, but Allah has given all the ilm of what is in the Quran which is not apparent to whom he has inspired him with the science of its wonders to complement this summary, to whom the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In other words, Imam is challenging, is answering the questions which are being put in the minds of the people at that time, and for all the ages to come up to today. That if you are asked, where is it that you are doing the Masail of Sayyidul Shuhada, sitting in this Az-Zahra, where is it in the Quran? Immediately I say, you know where it is in the Quran? It is there in the Quran. Where is it? Where it is said that you should pray 2 rakats in the Subuh, 3 rakats in the Maghrib, 4 rakats. It is there. When you finish there, it is there immediately. Where is it in the Quran? This is what Imam is saying, that the Quran is mujmal, it is in a summary form. But for every single word in the Quran, there is wisdom for all the time to come. That wisdom is with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is the relationship between these two guys, that they will never separate. The Prophet and the Quran can never be separated. But then the next question is, the Prophet is not there. Yes, now we accept the Prophet, all the words of the Prophet were Quran, and he gave us the hadith and everything, but he's gone. Then Imam answers, وَوَرَّثْتَنَا إِلْمَهُ مُفَسَّرًا. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made us inheritors of this knowledge. As what? As interpreters. See? This is where the question of Ahlul Bayt comes. This is how Imam is explaining to the public the role of Ahlul Bayt. This hadith that the Prophet has said, what does it mean? This is what it means. The primary source of knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came straight to the Prophet. But that knowledge that the Prophet had, it now comes, we are the interpreters of that knowledge. To interpret, those who go to the court for interpretation of languages, for example, you go there, you are competent in a language. The judge is there, the person who is facing the judge is there, he is speaking in Urdu, for example, and the judge has no idea about Urdu is. The interpreter is in between. He tells that judge, he reads, he does the translation for that language, the judge understands it. If that interpreter makes a mistake, there are so many Urdu speakers, immediately they say, you are making a mistake, you are not translating correctly. This is what Imam is saying, that the Quran will remain hasbuna kitabullah. No, kitab by itself is not enough. You need somebody to tell you what is in the Quran. Otherwise, wala ratbin wala yabis illa fi kitabin mubin. There is not a single dry thing or a wet thing which is not in the Quran. That's why, where is it? It is with those who have the knowledge. That is why it cannot be separated. This is what Imam says, that وَوَرَّثْنَا إِلْمَهُ مُفَسَّرًا. The detailed knowledge, the complete knowledge of the Quran, we have inherited. We are what? Yes, we are interpreters. That's why Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, when he used to tell people of all different types of hadith, people would ask him, where is this coming from? He would say, this is coming from the Prophet. All that I'm saying is not mine. These hadiths that the Imams were giving, it is not theirs. These are all coming from the Prophet. And that's why the Imam would say, I will not even mention it. It is not even necessary for me to mention it. Because just understand that whatever I say is coming from the Prophet. And where did the Prophet get from? The Prophet got it from Jibreel, who brought that from whom? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the reason, if you look at the Quran talks about 3 ways in which this knowledge was revealed to the Prophet. 3 or 4 different ways. One is, of course, Jibreel, who came to the Prophet in a human form and gave him the message. That is the Quran. There is a second message. How did he get it? From dreams. If you read Surah Inna Fatahna Laka Fathan Mubina, there is mention of a dream of the Prophet. He would have, in dreams, he would get this. Then he would be inspired. There's inspiration. There is sometimes he would listen it. These are different ways the Quran mentions about how the Prophet got all this information. But for Ma'sumin, he says, and you will soon see, how does this work with Ma'sumin? Then Imam alayhi salatu wasalam talks about the role of Ma'sumin, the role of the Ahlul Bayt. What does he say? وَفَضَّلْتَنَا عَلَى مَنْ جَهِلَ إِلْمَهُ. Ya Allah, you made us surpass those who are ignorant on this knowledge of Quran. Meaning there will be those who will start talking about the Quran. But we, Allah subhanahu, you have made us surpass them. This is the reason why the mazhab of Ahlul Bayt, they trace the hadith not from Tom, not from Dick, not from Harry. They trace it from the Imam of Ahlul Bayt. This is the problem. The other people follow the traditions from Shimr ibn Zuljawshan, Umar ibn Sa'd, yes, Hasin bin Namir. They are sources from some of these books of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. These are the sources. For us, no. For us, the sources of Ma'sumin from Ahlul Bayt. This is what Imam is again warning. Be careful. When Quran is being interpreted, see who is interpreting the Quran. Where is the source? The source is from the progeny of the Prophet. Do not take it from others. Why? Because Allah has فَضَّلْتَنَا عَلَى مَنْ جَهِلَ عِلْمَهُ. Allah has raised us among those people are ignorant. They do not know the Quran. Isn't this what Fatima Az-Zahra salawatullahi alayha again says in the court of Abu Bakr ibn Abu Quhafa? Isn't this what she says there? That Quran was revealed to you? Or was it revealed to us? And did he ever had that courage to tell them, no, the Quran was revealed to us and not to you? This is a challenge that you will see all over. When Ma'sumin faced with this situation, they mentioned the Quran. And when they mentioned the Quran, people kept quiet. Because they knew these are the guardians of the Quran. They know what is in the Quran. Therefore, Imam says, وَفَضَّلْتَنَا عَلَى مَنْ جَهِلَ عِلْمَهُ. More than that. This is the process. Imam is talking a process of how this ilm passes from the Prophet to the Imams of the time. These are the things relevant from then up to the age of time. See the relevance of this dua. It is for all ages to come. Then Imam says, وَكَوَّيْتَنَا عَلَيْهِ لِتَرْفَعَنَا فَوْقَ مَنْ لَمْ يُتِكْ حَمَلُهُ. Allahu Akbar. Imam says that you gave us the strength to raise us above those who were unable to do it. Quran is so heavy. The ilm in the Quran is so much that everybody cannot carry it. That's why Allah says, if it was revealed on the mountains, all the knowledge in the Quran was given to mountains, they would crumble. Ahlul Bayt are such, Imam says, that all that knowledge, no one can carry it. Only our shoulders can carry it. Why? Because, Ya Allah, you chose us to carry this for you. This is the reason Amirul Mu'mineen sometimes used to look in the well and say, there is so much that I have to say, no one can hear it. I might as well talk to the wells. And those who stayed with Amirul Mu'mineen will see how much they gained. You'll see them in Karbala. This is what Imam is saying, that everybody cannot carry the knowledge of Quran. There have to be those who the Prophet has said, Inni tarikum fikum uthaqalayn. Then Imam goes more. This is a dua, very powerful dua. More than that, Imam says, Ja'alta kulubana lahu hamala. Ya Allah, you made our minds, our hearts able to carry all this information. Otherwise, no one could have carried this information. It is only the Prophet who carried it. And the Prophet has given that load to us because, Ya Allah, you want us to carry that load. Why? Because the Prophet is not alive. Why? Because communities are emerging. How would these communities be guided in the world like today if they did not have this knowledge to guide them? This is what Imam is saying. You gave us heart. You gave us ability to carry all this ilm. In other words, again, teaching to those people, do not think in any way that we are better than Allah. We are servants of Allah. All this that you see in us is because of Allah, Tawheed. Importance of Tawheed. Oh, you people, whatever you will see in us, it is all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is all through the Prophet. We are not comparing ourselves with the Prophet. We are not saying that everything is from. We are all followers of Muhammad. And we are all the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These Wahhabis are trying to give the impression, these people give the Imams all the importance. They are more important than the Prophet. Never, never at all. If they just look in these du'as and understand what is in those du'as. Then Imam goes, Ya Allah. Then he says, وَأَرَّفْتَنَا بِرَحْمَتِكَ سَرَفَهُ وَفَزْلَهُ. You made us know through your mercy the nobility and excellence of this Quran. There is all the knowledge of the Quran is with us. Come to us. This is what is the appeal of the Imam at that very, very critical time. And this is why you have people like Abu Hamza Thimali. You have these. How has Islam been saved? It is these few people who benefited from the Imam and who therefore became teachers and carried out this message. This is how Islam has survived. The Imams trained and taught some of those who could take this ilm and spread it out. Go spread it out. When you go to the communities, talk to them. This is the role of these masjids of Sayyid al-Shuhada. The second thing which Imam encouraged was sitting for Imam Hussein. Azar of Sayyid al-Shuhada. That's why I always say, those of you who take part in these azars, the ajr, you will know it when you leave this world. There is so much, but with ma'rifah, if we sit here and understand what is the message of Sayyid al-Shuhada. This is the reason why these are the two things that go together. The du'as of Imam Zainul and the masail of Sayyid al-Shuhada, the azah of Sayyid al-Shuhada. The bases are the same. Here is where you learn the truth about Islam. This is how Islam was saved. Therefore Imam says that you have given us this ability to understand Islam. And having said all this, then Imam, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, these du'as, Allahu Akbar. If only we could perceive, we could understand these du'as. That the Imam says that, therefore, bless Muhammad and his household. And if you look at this dua, how many times the Imam reads salawat? Salawat is something which is very, very powerful. It's one of those things that many times we just underestimate it. He says when you read salawat, shaitan runs away. And therefore the hardest you read, shaitan runs away. The value of salawat is this. Wherever you sit, wherever you stand, wherever you go, if you have time, read salawat. Why? Because you are training your mind, you are putting it into yourselves, that the whole survival of Islam, that the message of Islam is through Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. What will happen is, at the time, which we talk about that tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be frightful. Not that I want to frighten anybody, but tomorrow this dua then talks about the stations of life. That this and the station of life, 5 or 6 stations where Imam mentions the difficulties, very difficult situations. So those of you who have got weak hearts, maybe you stay at home tomorrow because it's going to be harsh. We're going to talk about things which are harsh in this law. Why harsh? To remind those people who at that time, who believe only in the worldliness, that it is worldliness, therefore they're lost in Karbala because of that. Why did Umar ibn Saad, did he know Umar ibn Saad, believe it or not, was a Qari of Quran. He had committed Quran to memory. Quran was in his memory, Umar ibn Sa'd. And why did he commit the sins? Same thing. Quran by itself will not guide you anywhere. You've got to understand Quran. Today the Quran is being, there's a young person, a young Shia person. I wrote a long thesis on Islam. And what does he say in the thesis? That we give too much importance to the Prophet. And then he puts all the verses there to prove that we give too much importance to the Prophet. Why give so much importance to the Prophet? After he was nothing. Was Musa, there's Isa, why we give so much importance? And if you see all those verses that he puts together, why? Because he does not understand the Quran. And this has happened throughout the ages, of all the Imams of the time. One of the greatest scholars, a linguist, a person who was so strong, who was a linguist, and whose works up to today are some areas of science and technology. He had talked about it in those days. Abu Ishaq al-Kindi, a huge professor, a psychologist, mentioned it as a polymath who had authority over so many subjects of his time. He started writing a thesis on Quran. What was the thesis? That in the Quran there are so many contradictions. Allahu Akbar. That the Quran, there are so many contradictions. That's what happened when your knowledge comes to a certain area. Then you think you are you. So he is writing theses about contradictions in the Quran. And this is the time of the 11th Imam, Imam Hassan Askari alayhi salatu wassalam. And the Imam comes to know about this. You are the guide. How are you guide the community? When this is happening in the Quran, there are contradictions in the Quran. One student comes to him every day. And he says, the Imam says, I understand you are a student of this person, Al-Kindi. He says, yes. Can you do one favor? So what is it? Stay with him. Be a very good student. So I will do that. So do it. So he became a very good student with him. Then the Imam says, when you ask him some questions, what is it? He says, ask. The Imam gives him a question. Ask him this question. So he said, okay. He goes there. He says, I have a question for you, my professor. He says, what is the question? He says, is it possible? Now I'm just summarizing the question. The gist is this. Is it possible that somebody addresses you and there is a third person who is standing there, and what you understand, what that person who is addressing you says something which you understand but he does not understand, and he understands exactly differently? He says, what? Repeat that question. He repeats the question. Is it possible that there is Mr. A, Mr. B, and Mr. C? Mr. A is addressing Mr. B and talks about Mr. B, and they all understand and they laugh. And Mr. C he understands exactly why are they smiling, why are they laughing? They should be crying. How come? Is it possible that that third person does not understand what is going on between these two people? He said, repeat this question again. He repeats it. He said, who taught you this question? He says, no. He said, no. Who taught you this question? This question is not you. This thing, what you are telling, who taught you? First tell me. He says, Ibn Raza told me, Imam Hassan Askari. He says, yes, it is only he who could have asked. He said, true. What he is telling me that there is no contradiction in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is communicating with the Prophet. And the Prophet is telling us. The Prophet, Allah has not communicated with me directly. I understand what it is. He takes his thesis, he puts it in fire and he burns it. This is what the Imam is saying here. That all Imams of every time, whenever there is a crisis, whenever Quran is in jeopardy, the Ma'sumin come save it. And when Ma'sumin's life is in jeopardy, Quran saves it. How? The head of Imam Hussein is on the edge of a spear and he is reading Quran. This is what the verses say. This is hadith. Quran and Ahlul Bayt can never be separated. They will always be together. Therefore, Imam Zayn al-Abidin then finally says, "Oh, Ya Allah, we thank you for what? For the Prophet is Khatib. Prophet is Khatib. Khatib is a teacher, is a person who gives sermons, is Khatib. And as for us, we are Khuddan. We are the guardians of what the Khatib has said." This is the message that comes from this dua. If you read it on surface, you'll never understand. It's a very simple thing. It is not simple. This dua, we used to read it in the month of Ramadan after the recitation of the Quran, and we used to read it fast. We always find somebody who can read these duas very fast. It saves a lot of time. These duas are not just to be read. These duas are to be understood. And this is the reason why we all sit here. It is very dry, I understand the subject is very dry, but it has to be said. This is therefore the message, and this is what Sayyid al-Shuhada is the guide, did what he had to do. And those who were with him were ordinary people. They were not ma'soom. These were ordinary people, but the way they understood this knowledge and they followed the ways of Ahlul Bayt, this is what happened. Habib ibn Madahir, if you look at the traditions, at the events of Karbala, from the time Imam Hussein left Medina up to the day of Ashur, one person who is mentioned more than 10 times. You will see perhaps out of all those, other than the family of the member of Imam Hussein, of all those who are companions, the person who is mentioned many times is Habib ibn Madahir, more than 10 times. Number one, we hear about Habib ibn Madahir immediately when Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan dies. And there is therefore the problem in Kufa. Habib ibn Madahir, number one, is one of those people who meet in the house of Sulaiman Sard Khazai. They have a meeting. And in this meeting they decide, what do? We have to invite Imam Hussein to come and save us. Why? Because he is the guide. He is the guide. They know this. Therefore, that is number one. Number two is those who wrote letter to Imam Hussein inviting him and telling him, you are the Imam of the time, come to help us. Habib ibn Madahir is number one. His letter is there. Number three, Habib ibn Madahir, when he hears Imam Hussein is in Karbala, he is in the bazaar. He sees his friend, Muslim ibn Awsaja. He tells him, Muslim, what are you doing? Muslim is buying henna. He is an old man. His hair and his beard is white, but he used to color it. People do it. He bought a henna. Habib is asking him, Muslim, what are you buying? Say, I'm buying henna. Do you know the son of Fatima Az-Zahra is in Karbala? He says, yes. He takes this henna, throws it, and says, this beard now will be covered by the blood that we'll give for the sake of Islam. Number three. Number four, this is Habib, Imam Hussein, of all those people, few people to whom he personally wrote. Imam wrote letters to communities, Basra, Kufa, inviting people, yes. But among those whom he personally wrote a letter, Habib ibn Madahir. He wrote a personal letter in which he addresses him. You are a person of intelligence, and you are a man of faqih. You are a man of jurisprudence. I am inviting you to come for the cause of Islam. Number four, this is that Habib, therefore, who goes to Karbala at the time when Imam Hussein, there are these flags. These flags play their own part. Imam Hussein had several of these flags, and he's distributing among those people who are with him. There is one flag which is left. Somebody says, this is left. Imam says, no, I've kept this for a particular friend of mine. This is Habib ibn Madahir. When he comes there, Imam gives him the flag. When Habib ibn Madahir comes, there is so much of happiness that in the forces of Imam Hussein, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Zainab, the daughter of Ali, asked Fazza, who is the maid of the house, go find out what is happening. Why is there so much happiness. She goes and she comes back and she says, Habib ibn Mazahir has joined us. Zainab, the daughter of Ali, says, Hafidha, go give our salams to Habib ibn Mazahir. Habib, when he hears this, hits his head. That this is what has happened now in this world. The daughter of Fatima Az-Zahra, and she is sending me salams for me because I have come here. This is Habib ibn Mazahir. Then, when he is in Karbala, he goes to Bani Asad. There are those people who are around Karbala to recruit people so that they should come and help Imam Hussein. He brings some, but he does not succeed, and there's a long history. There's no time to go into this. This is that Habib ibn Mazahir, who on the day of Ashur, when the forces of Shimr, when Shimr tries to attack Imam Hussein, of those people who go forward to stop him, Abbas ibn Ali, Zuhair ibn Kain, Habib ibn Mazahir, again. When Imam Hussein asks them, the forces of Yazid, to give him time, Abbas ibn Ali is going to Imam Hussein to discuss with him. The person who stands there alone, Habib ibn Mazahir. Habib ibn Mazahir is the one who addresses them and tells them that what they are doing is wrong. Habib ibn Mazahir, on the day of Ashur, Imam Hussein gives him the command of the left wing. He is the head there. This is Habib ibn Mazahir. Habib ibn Mazahir at the time of prayers of Zuhr, when Imam Hussein, Sa'id, Abdullah, when he sees this is the time of prayers, they say, Abdullah Rasulullah, we want to pray behind you. This is the time of prayers. Imam Hussein says, may Allah raise you among those who have remembered prayers at the time. Go ask the forces of Yazid to give us time to pray. Who goes to ask for permission? Habib ibn Mazahir. And Hasid bin Namir tells Habib ibn Mazahir, they tell your Imam to pray, Allah ma'adallah, ma'adallah. Tell him to pray as much as he can. His prayers are not acceptable. This is what had become of those Muslims. They call themselves Muslims. These are the ones who had committed Quran to memory. Do not be cheated when you hear these people read this Quran in a very melodious voice. Don't be cheated. We had them in Karbala. And I said, Umar ibn Sa'd, after the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, when Imam Hussein's head is on the spear, people are asking him that this is the time where we haven't prayed Asr prayers yet. But it is so dark here. Where is Qibla? Umar ibn Sa'd, what does he tell them? Look at where the Hussein's head is facing. That is where Qibla is. These are the Muslims we are talking about. It's not that they did not know. But this is what happens if you leave, if you separate Ahlul Bayt from Quran. This is what happens. Quran will not help you. Habib ibn Mazahir therefore tells him, your prayers will be accepted, and the prayers of the son of the Prophet will not be accepted. This is the time when Habib decides that now I cannot take this anymore. Yabda Rasulullah, allow me to go and do Biras. Imam Hussein allows Habib, go. And Imam is praying. The world has become so polluted. The son of the Prophet is leading the prayers. The forces of Yazid are throwing arrows at him so that he should not pray. And there are those people who understood the role and the function and status of the Imam of the time. These are the people, Zuhair ibn Kain and Sa'id, Abdullah Hanafi. They are the two people who stand in front. They become the shield. Imam Hussein is praying namaz-e-khawf. Namaz-e-khawf, Imam is praying, and those two people are in front. The arrows are coming. They shield, they take all the arrows in their bodies. By the time Imam Hussein finishes his prayers, Sa'id falls down. Imam goes to him, Sa'id, this is his last breath. He says, Rasulullah, did I fulfill my responsibility? Imam Hussein tells him, oh Sa'id, you have fulfilled your responsibility. May Allah grant you a better place than this world in which you are. He passes away, and at this time Habib goes and fights. He does the battle, he fights up to the time when they kill Habib. Habib falls on the force. He falls down and they cut off his head before Imam Hussein could reach him. When Imam Hussein comes to where Habib is lying, Imam Hussein, historians say, those people who write history say that every time when a martyr died, there was sorrow, there was sadness in the face of Imam Hussein. But when Habib ibn Mazahir passed away, they said the face of Imam Hussein was full of grief that they had not seen before. Imam Hussein addresses Habib, "Oh Habib, you have left us at this time. Habib, you will meet my grandfather, and soon I will also join you. Oh Habib, this world has lost that person who used to read the whole night Quran." Imam Hussein is very sad that Habib ibn Mazahir has been martyred. He comes back to the Khaybar. The ladies find out that Habib has been killed. This is that Habib that on the night of Ashur had told his friends that let us go and assure the family of Hussein that so far as we are alive, nothing would happen to them. This is this Habib. When he came to the Khayma, when he came to meet Imam Hussein, and when Zainab, the daughter Ali, came to find out, she was so happy. She sent salutations to Habib. Ask Zainab what must happen to her when she learned that Habib ibn Mazahir has already been martyred. The hatred for Habib ibn Mazahir was such that historians say that the hatred was such that two personalities who defended Imam Hussein so much that the forces of Yazid had so much hatred for them that after they martyred them, they not only cut their heads from their bodies, but they hung the heads of these two personalities on the necks of the horse, so that as these horses walked away, they would kick these two heads in the dust of Uttare. These are the two heads, one of Abbas ibn Ali, and one was the head of Habib ibn Mazahir. The martyrdom of Habib was such, and Imam Hussein felt so much that he gave one honor to Habib. That honor is, you will see today if you go to Karbala, Habib ibn Mazahir's shrine is just outside the shrine of Imam Hussein. When Zawar go to Karbala to do their salams to Imam Hussein and to all the other martyrs of Karbala, before they go inside, they go to the shrine of Habib ibn Mazahir. Habib, oh Habib, you were the defender of faith. Oh Habib, you favored Jannah and you ran away from Jahannam. You fulfilled all your duties and ultimately you passed away. Oh Habib, Imam Hussein remembered you when he was left alone on the day of Ashur, when there was no one left. Imam Hussein, among those whom he remembered, was Aina Habib ibn Mazahir. Where are you? Oh Habib. Imam called out, oh Muslim, oh Habib, you always said you'd defend me. What has happened? I'm calling you and you are not replying me. It is said the body of Habib moved as if to reply, Ya Ibn Rasulillah, if it had not for death, I would still come and help you.
ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un.
Matam ya Hussein.
Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein.